The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to this week's Chasing Giants podcast. This is episode 174, I believe, Don, and we're closing in on the middle of June already.
Yeah, it won't be long. July 1st will be here, my favorite time of the year.
Yeah,
Counting
we had
down the days.
We are getting really close to where we're going to be inventorying bucks. We both had a pretty busy week just a few days ago. We were together in a meeting with some really exciting things about real world that we had at the beginning of the week. The biggest thing that we can talk about that I'm excited about, there's a lot of things I'm excited about, but one of the things is we're going to do a humongous party and training session for all the real world dealers next year before peak season. And I'm really, really excited about getting everybody together under one roof and kind of getting to know each other a little bit better, and also releasing some just unbelievable news that we got coming out next year. So if you're not a dealer, you better be.
Yeah, March 4th and 5th next year. Speakers, free meals, new products being introduced, a lot of educational stuff, regarding our products. But we're looking for an entertainer for one evening to speak to the crowd.
That is not Don or I, an actual entertainer, not two rednecks. So.
Yeah, we got some ideas. We just haven't got anybody confirmed yet, but it's a great opportunity for people to get together, to meet us in person. They can even pick up their spring order. We pushed it to early March 4th and 5th, so that that's about the time when a lot of dealers want to get their order in, and we can save them shipping costs by picking up their order while they're there at that meeting. They'll just have to have it in, a week or so ahead of that meeting. But real good time.
We got a lot of big things happening, things that no one, including you or I, would have ever dreamed we'd be in a position to do from a company standpoint. But getting everyone together is going to be exciting. We hope that it's beneficial and entertaining for everybody. So we were just together it seems like just a couple days ago, but I guess it was. I did the dreaded up and back trip for this meeting and ended up hauling back a new 360 blind with stand and my new Quiet Cat Apex bike, and my local dealer here in Northern Kentucky needed soybeans, so we stopped there and got that. And I loaded up on some herbicide, which that's my indirect way of teeing up a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Is we're getting close to that time where everybody's trying to evaluate when to spray and how to spray their plots. So we're going to spend some time talking about that today. I want to dive into a post you made this week about some new videos that you're doing, and I think a lot of them were at an orchard, which is kind of exciting because I think that spins a little bit into the full food plot and nutrition program that you're trying to implement. But it sounds like this guy was kind of dialed into some of the things you're talking about with soil health and organic stuff too. So pretty excited to hear about some of the stories from this week from you.
I'll tell you what, that 24-hour period where we went and filmed that video at the orchard, and my brain was just spinning when I left there. And that evening I was on the internet doing research on some of the things that I learned that day. And I think I learned more in that 24-hour period than I have any 24-hour period in at least a decade. This is hands down one of the most educational videos that we've filmed, and we're going to share, some of that here tonight.
Well, let's go ahead and unpack while we're talking about it. Let's do that, and then after the Osseo segment, we'll talk a little bit about spraying food plots, because I think you did that this week too. But why don't you explain the purpose of this trip to the orchard, and then talk a little bit about some of this content that you produced, and maybe tease a little bit and give some information about this orchard.
Yeah, well, Steve Shields was here Tuesday and Wednesday after our meeting on Monday. So I had a pretty full week, but I think we filmed 6 or 7 videos in the 2 days. But the most interesting one by far was, I've got a good friend. I've known him for a lot of years, Mike Mitchell. I used to work with him when I worked at the printing factory. Him and I became really good friends, and we was actually in each other's weddings when we got married. So I got out of the factory about 21 years ago, and he got out a little bit before I did, moved on to another job. But we stay in touch, see each other a couple times a year or so. And his father-in-law started an orchard many years ago, and then Mike retired early, but even before he retired, him and his wife were running that orchard, and took it over from her parents. And I'd been there probably, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago I was there and seen the orchard. And then I came back a year or two later, and it was like everything had just transformed. It wasn't even the same place, and I mean in a good way. And the business had grown, but the plants just looked so much healthier and everything. Well, Mike actually had cancer and had a real bad bout. So I'm going to guess about 15 years or so ago. And, he got into holistic, foods and medicines and soil health and everything. Well, his orchard, some of the trees in that orchard had gotten mature and they needed to be replaced. They were dying out and such. And so they tore out part of the orchard and they replanted that with new trees. Well, them new trees weren't doing good at all. They were doing terrible. And through a chance encounter, and I'm sure it was God orchestrating the whole deal, but through a chance encounter, a visitor at his orchard introduced him to a gentleman, I don't even know, soil nutrition expert, I'm going to call him. Mm-hmm. He's got a degree, a doctorate degree that only 2 people in the United States have. They know that the course was so hard that they quit offering it because nobody would stick with it. But 2 people got through it and got their doctorate in that degree, and this gentleman was one of them. And he spent 7 years developing a product, a micronutrient product for plants. But it goes way deeper than that. And when the whole reason I went was I wanted to do a video on somebody that was an expert on fruit trees, and help that person or help the deer hunters learn from that, so that we can, when we plant fruit trees on our properties for deer, that we can be way more successful. And you've got a picture up here on the screen right now of Mike and I that day, and these trees that we are standing by are 10 foot tall easily, and those trees are 1 year old. 1 year before, those trees were 4 feet tall. That they more than doubled in 1 year with Mike's approach. You can also see the strawberries growing under that tree row. He's using a holistic or a regenerative ag approach in his orchard, and the results are just absolutely amazing. For a tree to double in size, when you're planting a new fruit tree, and he uses bare root trees, he buys them in, by the hundreds, and for his orchard, and he sets them, and they're bare root. So anytime you dig a tree, a bare root, that tree loses a percentage of its roots, and it really stresses it that first year. And whenever I had the tree nursery, the saying was that when you planted a new tree, the first year it would sleep, the second year it would creep, and the third year it would leap. So it was really the third year when that tree would take off. Well, Mike has got these trees we seen trees that he planted 2 months ago, back in April, and those trees already have 18 inches of new growth on the branches. He amends the soil when he plants those trees. He amends the soil with, I think there's 3 different ingredients. I'm gonna skip mentioning them because I'm afraid I'll say it wrong, or because I actually don't even remember one of them, but it'll be on the video. But and then he sprays them with this micronutrient mix, and he actually markets it. If anybody's interested, 2 things that I would suggest is, first, you follow Osseo Valley Orchard. Osseo Valley Orchard is in Sullivan, Illinois. They've got a website. They also got a Facebook page and all that. And then Mike's product, that the gentleman that developed this product passed away. But before he passed away, him and Mike were working on, and they do it in big agriculture. But Mike wanted to sell it to like gardeners and such. And so him and the guy struck a deal, and Mike now markets it as Mike's Mighty Micros. And there's a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and I think he's on TikTok too. Mike's Mighty Micros. You want to follow them, and if you're interested in buying it or learning more, you can do that right there. But I mean, some of the terms and things he was using, and we got him talking, and it was like, Steve told me, he says, this video is going to be at least an hour long because there was so much good content. But I want to go back to that picture of trees that you showed at first, Terry, where those had the strawberries growing under it. Those were growing right along the driveway as we pulled in there, and those strawberry leaves, I wasn't sure I thought it was strawberries, but I wasn't sure because those leaves on those strawberries were like as big as my hand. And it's like, man, I think them are strawberries, but I've never seen strawberries with leaves that big. And it was just crazy. And then he had showed us his garden. He's got a raised bed garden there that he sprays this micro nutrient mix on too, and just absolutely incredible. If anybody's in Central Illinois, you ought to, this fall when the orchard opens. Actually, I think they're opening in July, and they've got a playground for kids, and on Saturdays they'll have like a food truck there, and sometimes they even have a band and things. But you need to check out Osseo Valley Orchard in Sullivan, Illinois. And if you're in Central Illinois, it would be worth your time to, maybe take your family on a Saturday or something and visit the orchard. And tell Mike I sent you. But I'm sure that he would enjoy talking with you about, what all he does in his orchard as far as the holistic approach or the regenerative ag approach to growing those fruit trees. But I'm really excited about this video because I think, and I'm getting ready to plant some more fruit trees probably next spring on the new 40 that I just got. And I'm going to be implementing a lot of the things that I learned this week. And like I said, I don't think there's been any 24-hour period in over a decade where I learned more than I did that day.
So after learning what you did and seeing firsthand what these trees are doing, I mean, Don, you got a lot of experience with small trees with your past career. Are you sold enough that you're going all in on new tree plantings on your property? Or are you going to do a test with and without this approach with tree plantings to see for yourself on your property? Did what you saw at their place, is it a sold deal for you?
Oh, I'm absolutely blown away. I'm all in. In fact, I brought home a 2.5 gallon jug of this nutrient mix, and you only use 1 ounce of this stuff per gallon of water. So I think he's selling that jug that you showed on the screen there as a quart jug, 32 ounces, and that'll make 32 gallons of spray.
But that's not just for fruit trees, though. It looked like he was using that just even in his garden and everything else. Yep. So,
yeah, absolutely. People use it on their vegetables, but also on their flowers. These these people that get into growing these exotic flowers or whatever, they're spraying that on them. And you don't do it every day. You do it about once every week to 10 days. But I was so impressed. I came home with a jug of that stuff, and I sprayed my corn and my soybean plots this week, and I mixed some of that in there to spray on them. So if I've got Jack and the Beanstalk real world soybeans this fall, it's because of Mike's Mighty Micros.
Well, we're going to keep an eye on that. Definitely. It's exciting when people go back to the basics versus try to oversell a gimmick. And I think we talk about that a lot on the podcast. You know, this guy's really going back to all natural foundations of what soil health is, and truly seeing the benefits. I mean, when you look, I had no idea. We hadn't talked. When I saw that picture of you standing in front of those 10-year-old trees, I did think, I was like, man, they're awful spindly for a tree that's 2 to 3 years old. The trunk's not very big, but you're saying that's a 1-year tree already at 10 feet tall. That's I've never seen anything like that.
Well, and you got to remember, those trees are being grown on a trellis for fruit production.
Right.
And he's trying to grow them tall. If you're going to spray that on a fruit tree that you're going to grow for deer, it's not going to get 10 feet tall in 1 year, but it is going to put a whole lot of new growth on the ends of those branches.
Right. Yeah, he's growing it for a different purpose than someone who would have it out on the edge of their food plot. But getting that much growth is insane. And you're right, those strawberry plants, 3 of those things are the size as your big old foot, and you got a pretty big foot.
Yeah, those and the thing of it is, there was some fruit there that we got to eat. They'd picked the strawberries here a day or so before we got there, but we dug around and we found some red ones, and man, the flavor was just incredible.
Well, I'll be out because I've never eaten a strawberry before, so I wouldn't.
You've never eaten a strawberry?
I never told you that story.
No,
I've never had a banana or a strawberry.
Unbelievable. You can have the bananas. I don't care about the stinking bananas, but I'll tell you what, you're missing something with the strawberries.
Yeah, I just had some.
That was the last thing I ate before I got on tonight. I had a bowl of strawberries right after supper, and then we got on here to do the podcast. It's fantastic.
I've eaten weird stuff from all over the world in all of my business travels, and I've never eaten a strawberry or banana. At this point in my life, it's just write it out and give somebody something to talk about at my eulogy that he never ate a strawberry, I guess.
Well, last time you was in Japan, you sent me a picture of whole fish and code brown mixed together on a plate, and you never had a strawberry.
I didn't say I ate that. I just sent you a picture of it. It was on somebody's breakfast plate.
Well, I hope you didn't eat it, actually.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to circle back around after the Biofarm segment to talk about spraying food plots. It's that time of year that we're trying to evaluate when to spray. We want to spray early enough to get the weeds that we want to kill before they get more mature and hard to kill. But we don't want to spray too early because then we might have to spray twice, to get it before the canopy fills over. So we're going to come back to that after the Osseo segment. But before we do, I want to throw up a slide and mention another deal that we talked about 2 weeks ago with Chris Yates at Victory Chevrolet. Will you drop this for us?
Yeah, I talked to Chris a little over a week ago before we recorded last time, and he's got a full inventory of half-ton trucks, both Chevy Silverados and GMC Sierras, and he's looking to move them. And I think he's got at least 5 dealerships that you got on the screen there. And I seen on social media today that I think they're building a new one, aren't they?
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, they broke ground on a new one. But anyway, Chris is offering $8,000 off on these half-ton pickups. Lots of inventory. This is not for special order trucks. You got to buy out of his inventory, but he assured me they've got a lot of inventory to pick from.
Yeah, I think the supply chain stuff is getting a little bit fixed, and the reason that guys like Chris keep expanding is it gives him more purchasing power from the manufacturers. So each dealership is limited to what they're allowed to order every month to the factory. But with him having 5, maybe 6 dealers now, he can spread that out. So he's able to get a lot of variety that maybe your local dealer is. So before Don reads this number for everybody to have, if they want to call Chris Yates or the dealership, just know it doesn't matter where you're at. Chris has the ability to sell these trucks and ship them to wherever you're at. The transportation cost is not that bad. We've had people listen to this podcast in like Connecticut and Florida. I think we had somebody, was it Oregon or Idaho, buy a truck from him. I mean, he's shipped them all over the place. So don't think if you're not in the Kansas City area, he can't treat you right and take care of you and save you some money.
Yeah, and so the number to call, I'm not going to give you a number. It's not Chris's direct number. He's just so busy that he asked that I give the dealership number. And if this dealership doesn't have the truck there, they will put you in touch with one that does. And that number is 816-244-6487.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and listen to a spot from Osseo. I saw Joe Miles was down in Texas whacking and stacking again. That guy's just a machine. I've never seen anybody like him.
I think he hunts every month of the year and maybe every week of the year.
It may be every week of the year, but yeah, he's from a perspective of being able to I guess, I don't know. The people who haven't listened to his podcast maybe don't realize, but he actually trained with like African outfitters for a while as like a full guide. So if you're not listening to the Mission Whitetail podcast, give it a listen. It's quite interesting. He has a much different spin, and I don't know of anybody else that hunts as much or is able to harvest as many different species, and especially whitetail, as him. So we'll be back in just a second after a message from Osseo Camo.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear, prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. Well, we don't want to get too far off topic, but we think it's really important to mention a special prayer request this week. You posted on your personal Facebook page a story and message that we got from one of our listeners named Brian Scott, and I'm going to share this family picture, and you can talk just a quick bit about their situation and what we learned this week. And we really appreciate all of our podcast family keeping this man and his son in their prayers.
Yeah, back in it was before we recorded episode 135. Brian had contacted me and asked if the Chasing Giants family would pray for his family and his wife particularly. She'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, and we did mention that on episode 135. Well, this week I heard from Brian, and his wife passed away here about a week or so ago, and left a 1.5-year-old son and Brian. And I just can't imagine what he's going through. It's got to be devastating. And that little boy to have to grow up without really ever knowing his mother is just almost tragic. So I'm just asking for the Chasing Giants family to keep Brian Scott and his son in your prayers. Bring some healing to their situation, and heal his heart, and just let him know that we care about him. We're thinking about him.
It brings back a lot of memories, and sometimes tough memories. When we got the phone call that my wife had cancer, I think my daughter was, I think she was about 2.5 or 3. And I'll never remember that sinking feeling that you get when the C word is mentioned. There's so much anxiety as you go through doctor's appointments and tests and worry, and then it comes back. Unless you've gotten that call, you just really don't know. And then, we're so thankful that obviously my wife was able to fully recover. So I can't even put into words what, I think I should say or do to give comfort to Brian, because I never had to go through what he's going through with his son. But Brian, if you're listening tonight, give that boy a big hug and just know that there is a lot of people in the outdoor community and a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, that are lifting you up in prayers. We're all behind you. And
yeah, one of the things I'm proud of about this podcast is it's almost like a family following. When people have a need for prayer or whatever, we get a lot of prayer requests. Some people don't want it mentioned, on the podcast, but it feels good that these people think enough of us to reach out and share their situation, and that we've made them comfortable enough to, speaking about Christ and such, that they will reach out to us. So again, just keep Brian and his son in your prayers, for at least the next several weeks anyway.
I know he's not the only one hurting, but it's a pretty cool community that we have right now. And Brian listens to our podcast, I think, every week, and just know there's a lot of people that are behind you. And although your wife's not with us right now, she's sitting with Jesus right now, and we'll get to see her and meet her soon. So let's move on and talk a little bit about fall. Sorry, I'm a little flustered right now. Let's talk a little bit about spring spraying. We're in this really weird time right now with most of us being dry. Our food plots may or may not have gotten a big drink of water. Last week, you mentioned on the podcast that all we needed right now was a big shot of rain, and you got that last Sunday. Now what we're seeing is the food plots explode. I walked behind your shed Monday morning, and I think your corn was 6 inches taller than what it was in the picture that you posted a couple days before. But just like the food plot plants are going to grow, that's also going to give a shot to those weeds that have been setting there also. So let's talk a little bit about when to spray in the spring plant season. What are you looking for? Because I believe you sprayed this week. When you go out and look at your food plot, what are you looking for to decide when to spray your corn and beans?
Well, you look for that ideal window. For me, I was waiting to get a good rain, which, like you mentioned, Terry, last Sunday we got 1 inch and 3/10, and then I wanted those crops that I'm growing to get a good drink for a couple days. They'd been stressed from the drought that we'd been having, but also for those weeds. The best time to spray it and kill a plant, it's most susceptible when it's growing and actively growing, not just barely maintaining itself, but when it's growing. And that rain caused everything to have a growth spurt. And so when I came home Wednesday from doing the interview there at the orchard, and I already had my sprayer on the tractor waiting, and Steve headed for home. And as soon as he headed for home, I jumped on my tractor and filled up the sprayer, and I went and sprayed my soybeans. But I'm also looking at the crop itself, and how many weeds are out there, what kind of weeds. And I like to wait as long as possible on the soybeans because I want them to be about ready to canopy over. So if you can spray those weeds and you kill everything there, except your soybeans, and they're actively growing real, because of the rain, they'll canopy over and you won't have to spray them a second time. And that situation happened this week, although I've got my soybean plots are getting browsed probably as hard as they ever have. And the crazy thing is I think it's rabbits as much as anything, because every time I've looked at my soybeans, there's rabbits running all over the plot, and you can just see where they've been browsed off. But they're growing. There's enough. My plots are big enough, and I planted heavy enough that they're going to be fine. I'm going to have a soybean crop, but um, I've just I wish they hadn't been browsed as hard, where they would canopy over a little quicker. So I'm going to get by with one spraying. But the other thing that I'm doing is with this regenerative ag that I'm started in my plots this year, I'm adding some other things when I'm spraying. So obviously I put the glyphosate in because the Gen 2 soybeans are glyphosate tolerant. So I put the glyphosate in to kill the weeds, but I also added fulvic acid, which will really help the plants. And then I put some of that Mike's Mighty Micros on that I just picked up from Mike that day, and I sprayed that on as well. There's just a variety of different products that I'm using this year. Kelp, I've got a water soluble kelp product. Kelp is one of the healthiest things in the world. Whenever I had the captive deer, I would put kelp meal in their feed. It's got I think it's 68 or 69 different nutrients in kelp meal, and it's good for animals and it's good for plants. So, my ultimate goal, and I don't think we've been really talked about this too much, is I've got these deer from my area converging on my farm every fall, and they're spending the whole winter here eating in my plots, eating on my property. And I see that as an opportunity and that's the most stressful time of the year. So I see it as an opportunity when they're feeding the majority of their food is coming out of my plots. I want those plots to be as healthy as possible so the deer become healthy as possible. And when they disperse in the spring, those bucks that spent the winter here, they are in fantastic shape to grow their next rack. And that's the whole reason that I'm going with this regenerative ag holistic approach is when those deer come onto my farm, I want them to have all the food they can possibly want. I want them to have variety, as many different food sources as possible. And I want those food sources to be as nutrient dense and as healthy as possible for those deer, just because I believe it's going to help with next year's antler production. When those deer disperse, they're going to get through the winter a whole lot better. So that's really my goal in that whole switch, if you will, to the regenerative ag.
Well, you being out in the middle of big open ag country, and after the crops are harvested, there's not a lot of cover around you. You're pulling deer for miles in late season. You've talked about that many times, especially when the weather gets cold. They just pour into your property from all directions around you. But that same approach and methodology really holds true for even the guys that feed or the guys that have late season food plot, where even though there might be cover on the neighbor's property around them, they quit their supplemental feeding as soon as, season's over or nobody else has food. Anybody who's pulling these deer in, it's an interesting approach when you have that ability to make such an impact, when you have the drawing power and all of the deer are on your place during the most pivotal time, meaning when the food's lacking. So when you walk out and look at your soybean plot, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, maybe I need to learn and change my approach. Historically, I've broadcasted my beans. I don't have a drill. So normally my beans are a little bit thicker than probably what most people are. I'm planting at least 60, maybe even sometimes as much as 70 pounds per acre. So mine canopy pretty quickly, but I'm still usually waiting till my beans are almost like 8 to 10 inches tall before I'm spraying, because it's just long enough that I'm going to get that canopy after that spray, but, big nasty weeds like hogweeds or, other stuff that's coming up, I don't have them big mature stalks, that they're like this big around trying to get it to spray. Is that the right approach?
Yes, depending on the weeds you're trying to kill. I mean, and there's some weeds that doesn't matter how big they get, they're going to be easy to kill with glyphosate. There's other weeds like mare's tail, water hemp. You're going to be lucky if you kill them at all with glyphosate. But the key is, if you're going to have any success, the shorter that weed is when you kill it, or when you spray it, the better you're going to be. If you can get them when they're 6 inches or less, then your success rate is going to be way better.
Well, that was what I was hoping you would say. Is it's not I was hoping I'd tee you up on that. It's not necessarily one application fits everybody. You have to identify what weed you're trying to kill and then change your approach. And if you hit mare's tail, water hemp early, you might not kill it, but you'll set it back a little bit. But you got to do it early. Once it's established, you're going to have a field of it.
Right. And that's why it's so critical to have a good residual herbicide. The other thing is, if you put a good residual down, you could really delay that spraying, because you're not going to have hardly any weeds, for several weeks after planting. And then when they start coming on, you can hit them while they're still pretty young, and your soybeans should have some size to them.
Yep. So for the guys that are really, really dry still right now, they haven't gotten that shot of rain that you got last week. And we got rain here, but I don't think we have rain in the forecast at least for another week. If it's dry and we know that those plants are kind of a little stressed out because of how dry it is, but we're starting to see a little weeds, should we go ahead and spray, or even if we see a little bit of stress in those plants, or just wait until after we see rain?
Well, I'd probably go ahead and spray, and the reason for it is as those weeds get bigger, they're going to be more difficult to kill. The thing of it is, there's a chance you could have to spray twice. The other thing is, I would strongly recommend a good surfactant with your chemical. That'll help that herbicide stick to the plant and absorb into the plant better.
So for the people who might be new to this, what is surfactant? To explain that a little bit.
Well, it's just a chemical that you mix in when you mix your herbicide in your sprayer, and it's almost sticky. Like, the best way to explain it is, if you spilled some Coca-Cola or pop, on your counter, and you didn't wipe it up, and you came back the next day, there would still be that sticky residue there. And this is like this sticky residue that's got your herbicide with it. So when you spray it on your plant, it's not just water that evaporates and boom, it's gone. It's that sticky substance that holds that herbicide there on the plant and makes it way more effective.
There's some old timers around me that have been known to maybe put a little bit of splash of diesel fuel in with their herbicide, but
that'll do
the oil in it is what makes it stick on old plants. So I don't know if people around the country that listen to the podcast have ever seen some old timers do that, but when they really want to kill stuff, I got a couple of my neighbors that will put a little diesel in it. I'm sure the EPA and the tree huggers will love that comment, but I didn't say we did it.
You definitely do not want to do that if you're spraying your crop like soybeans. It'll wipe out your soybeans too. But something, a trick that I heard years ago, and I've actually done it a couple times back years ago when I was starting food plots, and all I had was like an ATV sprayer, a 25-gallon sprayer on the back of my four-wheeler. I was told, and I was just learning about, and I'm still learning really about herbicides, but I was told you just go to the grocery store and you get some cheap, the cheapest 2-liter bottle of pop you can find, and you pour that in your sprayer, and that stickiness of the pop will mix with that herbicide, and it'll do the same thing as a surfactant. So, if you're listening to this and you don't have access to surfactant, just go to your grocery store and get the cheapest generic brand of pop you can find and dump a couple 2-liter bottles into your spray tank, and there you go.
Well, I got a funny story about 2 liters of pop if you want to hear it. Tuesday night, I hosted 13 Japanese guys at my house, and we went out back and let them shoot guns, because in Japan they can't have guns. So every few years when we rotate out Japanese guys that are over here for, a few years, they go back, and before they go back, we let them come shoot guns. So We don't typically shoot tannerite during the week because it gets the neighbors a little upset, when something's booming from a half mile away. But so what I started doing years ago is I go to the dollar store or Walmart and buy cheap 2 liters of like orange pop, because
Yeah.
you can take them out and you can shake them up and set them on the ground, and then they shoot them and they explode and go over. But the orange is really cool for the visual, because they're sitting there, they don't, a lot of them speak English. So I took a set of sawhorses and took a piece of plywood with like a 3-inch hole saw and made a hole to where the 2 liter would turn upside down and set inside the wood, and drove the side by side out there, shook them up, put 4 in there, and then drove back. And I put a 7 mag in a Caldwell lead sled and let them shoot these things from about 180 yards away. And we blew up, I think we blew up about 50 some 2 liters letting them shoot these things. And they got the biggest kick out of it. And then I let them shoot some cantaloupe. That was the only big fruit I could find at the grocery store. We shot some big cantaloupe with a shotgun. And after they left that night right at dark. And the next night I went, and actually one of the guys dropped his wallet when we were out there. He couldn't find it. So I went out there to where we were shooting. And Don, I looked over on the hill and there was like 14 deer over there grazing where that orange pop had blown up.
They liked it.
And it sprayed all over it. So I guess if you want to put orange pop in there as your crop oil, you might attract some deer. I don't know. They seem to like the orange pop.
Well, I guarantee you those Japanese guys will remember that the rest of their life.
They have a big time. I let them shoot pistols and shotguns and rifles, and then at the end, I take a few ARs out there and we rotate and basically just let them empty full 30 round magazines and keep swapping the gun out so I don't melt barrels off. But they have a big time. It's actually really stressful. I don't really enjoy it because you got people that don't speak English a lot of times, and that many people, you got to have good help and make sure that it's safe. The last thing I want to do is get somebody hurt. But
right,
they enjoy the experience. They probably think all of America is like that. Maybe it needs to be. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'd be better off if it was.
If only my grandfather, who fought in World War II in the Pacific and drove a amphibious assault boat up on Iwo Jima, could see me having Japanese guys at my house teaching them how to shoot firearms. I don't know that he'd know what to think. We've come a long way since 1944.
I was thinking the very same thing as you was telling your story.
Yeah.
I was gonna leave the history part out of it.
Yeah. We've come a long way since the 40s, that's for sure. Yeah. So yeah, the people that are evaluating their food plots right now, I guess our recommendation is know what you're spraying for. That's going to dictate a lot of what you're doing. Non-GMO corn right now is going to be your tougher stuff. There is some mixes that you can put together. We're not getting into it. You need to talk with your local chem rep on that. But if you go and ask for some recommendations for sweet corn, your residual is so important for your pre-emergent on your corn side. Your enlist beans obviously have a different trait that you can spray 2,4-D and Liberty, but Roundup Ready. You want to wait long enough that you don't have to spray twice if possible, but get those weeds before they get too big. And I guess the other part of that question before we got sidetracked on that Japanese shooting story is worry more about the weeds getting too mature than you are about the plant being stressed because it's dry. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The bigger that plant gets, the harder it is to kill.
And the thing that I think people really struggle to understand is you could take a jug of concentrate glyphosate and pour it on a soybean plant. It's not going to kill it. You can't mix the stuff too heavy for your soybeans. It's just the stuff's expensive, so you don't want to waste it, but you want to mix a good strong batch to kill these plants.
Yeah, and also you can spray that soybean plant as soon as it comes out of the ground.
Right.
glyphosate tolerant from the time it comes out of the ground. You don't have to let it get a certain size.
All right. Good information. Let's move on to the first question of the week. I think you got 6 to answer tonight. We're going to try to get through them all.
I guess I couldn't count because I thought I sent you 5. But first one comes from Adam Babb from Valmeyer, Illinois, I believe. Says, Don, on the Wired to Hunt podcast this week, they said in another study done by Craig Harper of the University of Tennessee, they found that soil quality does not necessarily equate to plant quality, and went on to say that in their research, no matter the quality of the soil, the plant had the same amount of nutrients. What do you think about this? Adam, I'm telling you what, your question, the timing of your question was absolutely perfect, because this week at the orchard, I seen the benefits of healthy, nutrient-dense soil. I have a hard time buying it, to be honest. Now, I know better soils are going to produce more tonnage, more volume of whatever plant or feed you're talking about. But that the idea that richer soils won't grow more nutrient dense plants, I have a hard time buying that. I mean, there's soils that are deficient in a lot of different nutrients. There is no way they can take up. Let's say if a soil is deficient in whatever, calcium. Well, how can that plant produce, the same nutrient analysis as one grown in a soil that has plenty or excess calcium? I don't know. I may be wrong. I'm not an expert at this.
Is he saying that the tissue analysis isn't any different, but the tonnage will be more? Or is he saying the tonnage will be less? I guess I'd really, last time we brought up something, we got chastised because, you need to go read this guy's work before you. I don't know. We can't win for trying sometimes, but I don't understand how people can think that you don't put nutrients and have better soil to get a better plant, and that plant won't take up that. Well, why do you think the ag industry and everything that they do, there's input costs into what they put in?
Mm-hmm.
If that was the case, these people who do this for a living, people pay their house payment with agriculture income. They wouldn't put the inputs into their crops anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think in the question he mentioned yield or tonnage. I think he's just talking about nutrient analysis, and I don't know. I have a hard time buying it. I just can't imagine that you can't have a healthier, more nutrient dense plant that if it's grown in a healthier, more nutrient dense soil.
And again, we don't want to. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We don't know this guy, don't know his work. Probably not going to spend a lot of time going and chasing it down. But like anything else on the internet, you can probably find supporting data for whatever you want to believe and what you want to follow. So if you look hard enough, you can find what you want if you look in the right place.
And I don't know what the what the lesson here is. Is it you don't need to fertilize your food plots? I mean, what's the lesson?
I don't know. Not sure. Can't really help you on that one, buddy.
Well, I'm going a different direction with my plots, as I explained earlier. So I'm gonna make those plants as healthy as I can.
I think you've made it clear what the goals are on your place. So we're gonna stick to that and let other people do what they want to do.
Yep.
All right.
And this one comes from William Miller from Apple Creek, Ohio. And I want to throw out here that, we get a lot of questions sent to us by our Amish listeners who don't have the internet. And I dug through some, and some of these had been sitting on my desk for some time. So if you hear your name being called out and you think, man, I sent that in a year ago, well, you're probably right. You did send it in a year ago, and it's been sitting on my desk. And I think this was one of them. So William Miller from Apple Creek, Ohio says, Dear Don and Terry, I recently had a veteran deer hunter said that he believes that coyotes kill more mature bucks than all the rest of the deer put together, including fawns. I find this very hard to believe. I would find it interesting to hear your thoughts on this. William, that veteran deer hunter that you're talking about doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. There is absolutely no way that coyotes are killing more mature bucks than they are fawns. No way. And I think that coyotes can kill mature deer. Usually it's the sick or the injured deer that are weaker and easier to catch, but they also kill a lot of fawns. There is absolutely, I seen we just bashed one study, but I'm going to talk about another study. I seen a study where they put trail cameras on a coyote den. And have you remember that one, Terry? Where they watched the parents brought back food.
What all they brought back? Yeah.
Yeah. And didn't they bring back something like 50 fawns or some ridiculous number of fawns? So you're going to tell me that those same coyotes went out and killed 50 mature bucks? Come on, they probably didn't kill 2, maybe probably not even 1. That's just garbage.
I think it probably has to do with the area, Don, because if you have an area that a bunch of people are shooting mechanical broadheads and wounding mature bucks, then the coyotes might be killing a bunch of them.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. Yep.
Get you teed up a little bit there, buddy.
Yeah.
So you're not buying that coyotes kill more mature bucks, though.
No, absolutely not. Some of the things people come up with, I'm telling you, folks, I bet you each week I dig through at least a minimum of 30 to 40 new submitted questions. And some of the stuff that does not make the podcast is just unbelievable what people come up with.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to this week's Buyafarm.com segment. And we got Don Bailey on the line to get us some more information about a property in Jackson County, Illinois. Don, we've been on the show talking about this property before, but you wanted to refresh everybody's memory and talk about it a little bit more tonight.
Yes, Terry. It's 65 acres in Jackson County. It's near Murfreesboro, Illinois. The appealing things about it, it's got 34 acres tillable of real good dirt. It's some low-lying dirt where it's really producing. Mm-hmm. The remaining of it is a large hill with quite a bit of big timber on it, Terry. Has good road frontage, has rural water and electricity running by the road. It's just a property that someone needs to take a look at. It's also got a large pond or small lake up on the upper side of it, on the hillside.
Yep. Well, I remember talking about this property before, and we said that, this property gives the flexibility for a buyer to be able to lease out or farm the tillable, or he could even put it in, some type of program being good dirt. So you got the best of both worlds. You can get income to help pay for this property as you develop it into whatever it is, whether it's a home site or a hunt camp or anything else.
Yeah, some of that lower lying ground, Terry, as you know, some of the CRP program are amazing as far as what they pay. And the listed price on it, Terry, is $49.50 an acre, but they've got some health issues and they'll want to sell it. Okay, so if anybody's got a reasonable offer, we'll sure take it to them.
So motivated sellers right now, again, Jackson County, Illinois, they need to move this property, and I think it could make something. It's got a lot of road frontage, which for a deer hunter, that's fantastic because it gives you additional access points depending on how you laid the property out to hunt it. And, if somebody wanted to put multiple home sites on it, if a family wanted to move in there and have a place for, their kids to live on down the road, it gives that flexibility too. A lot of open opportunities with this one.
Yes, sir. And like I said, just if they're looking for something that's worth the money, they definitely need to take a look at this, Terry.
All right. Well, motivated sellers, again, Don, give your contact info, and obviously we want to encourage everyone to go to buyafarm.com and search by county. Again, this is in Jackson County. But if they want to get a hold of you directly, how do they do that?
Yeah, it's Don Bailey at Biofarm Land and Auction Company. My direct phone line is 618-919-1031, or they can email me at dbailey@biofarm.com.
Sounds great. Thanks for being on the show again this weekend, and we appreciate the help again from Biofarm. You guys have been with us from the beginning. Can't tell you how much that means.
We're proud to be there, Terry. We admire you guys. Thank you.
Go check out Biofarm, guys. Thanks for your time.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, next one's from Brady Otto from Bunker Hill, Indiana. He says, hello, Don and Terry. Love the podcast and how you use your platform for things bigger than deer hunting. My question is directed more to the spiritual side. This is for both of you. How and when did you feel God's calling to pursue the outdoor industry and make a career out of it? Thank you, and God bless. Well, Brady, I love the fact that you're thinking outside of the box and you're throwing questions out here that, the typical listener is not going to think to send in. And those, I don't want to call them odd, but those different kind of questions are some that I like. And so when did I first feel the calling? Something really interesting is that, I'll be 60 years old this summer, and I've got the very, very same interest in my heart today that I had when I was 6 years old. And I've watched a lot of my friends, and as they grew up, we had the same interest as kids, and they totally went different directions. As they got older, they changed directions, and they went, they got new interest in what they was interested in when they were younger. They have zero interest in today, but I was never like that. What I was interested in as a kid, I still am today. I remember when my aunt tells me the story quite often that when I was a little kid, she was taking me to the babysitter. My parents were working, and that she would have to drive around the countryside with me standing in the seat next to her in her car, and she would have to go find some, because I didn't want to go to the babysitter. She would have to go find some cows and stop along the road for me to see the cows, to get me in a good mood to go to the babysitter. And I'm still interested in cows to this day. I've always been interested in the outdoors. And I wouldn't say that I was interested in the hunting industry, because the hunting industry did not exist back when I was a kid like it does today. Totally different. But I did have a desire from a very early age to be an outdoor rider. And, my grandpa subscribed to like Outdoor Life, Fur Fish Game, Field and Stream, all those magazines when I was a kid. And I remember just being 5 years old, sitting on the couch at his house and not even old enough to read, just looking at the pictures of the wildlife and such. And I can't even remember how young I would have been when I started dreaming of being an outdoor rider. And I thought that to be an outdoor rider, you had to be an expert on your subject. And as I got older, like into my 20s or whatever, I finally realized that a lot of these outdoor riders didn't know squat about what they was talking about, because I was reading everything I could get my hands on, and I was going to the woods and applying what I was reading, and it was almost never worked the way it read in the magazines. And what I figured out was that these guys writing magazine articles at that time anyway, a lot of them were excellent writers but not excellent hunters. And so my goal was to be an outdoor rider. And that dream came true back in the mid 1990s when North American Whitetail published my first article. And since then, I've done things in the outdoor industry that I could not have even imagined because they didn't exist. Whitetail consulting was basically unheard of 25 years ago. So how could I have dreamed of something that wasn't even happening? And I say all the time that God's reality is bigger than anything we can possibly imagine. Our imagination is not big enough to even fathom God's reality, and his reality for my life and what he's allowed me to do in the hunting industry is way more than I could ever have imagined. And even as a deer hunter, the caliber of bucks that I've been blessed to harvest, it just, I could not have imagined it, 25, 30 years ago. So it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly, when I felt God's calling for me to be in the outdoor industry. I think he put that love of the outdoors in my heart as a child, probably before I was even born, and it never left. It just grew and grew and grew, and each year it still grows. I'm so fired up right now to get my trail cameras out in a couple of weeks. I'm as fired up as I was 30 years ago for opening day. So I think it's just something that he put in my heart, and there was no certain specific time when I felt that.
I'll let you know when I feel called to be in the outdoor industry. It hasn't happened yet.
I was wondering how you was gonna answer that.
Boy, I honestly don't know how to answer it, because this is one of the type questions that I wish I would have a day or two to really think about, because I'm going to fumble through this and people are going to take it the wrong way. And I don't know if I'll be able to even talk halfway intelligently on it or not. But I honestly, I do believe God calls people to do things. I think God calls people with a desire for the ministry, missionaries, pastors, youth workers. I think that is God, working inside of people. But to say that God calls someone to be a deer hunter versus a golfer versus a fisherman, with hobbies, I don't know, thinking through this in my head, I don't know that God calls us to do that. I think that might be an interest that we like, but I think God calls us to use what we do enjoy to make a difference in other people's lives. So to say that God called me to work in the machine tool industry, that's my career. I work in manufacturing. I don't know. I don't know that God even called me to love running businesses. I mean, the whole reason you and I have started this whole relationship many years ago was because you asked me to help me run and do part of your business. And I enjoy running businesses, but is that a calling from God? I don't know. Maybe somebody a lot smarter than me needs to tell me or not. But I think God does call me, that if I am presented an opportunity with things I enjoy to witness to people, I think that's where our calling is. Maybe that doesn't make sense, and maybe I'm fumbling through that, but I don't know that God really, he gives each of us the freedom and the passion of different things we enjoy. And some things might change. You said you're the same interest since you were 8. Some people might start out loving, baseball, but then they realize nothing in their genetic gene pool is going to be a professional, baseball player. So they pick up a different hobby. But I think through your life, that I believe that the calling that God has is to use whatever influence, platform, or kind of social scenario that you're in to witness to people. I believe that's where God's calling is for us. And I have no desire to be in the outdoor industry, but God presented an opportunity to do this, that I can try to help families through Lester's Feet, that we can try to witness to people. And, if anything, Don, this podcast and us talking about our faith holds us more accountable for how we act. I really have to think sometimes. It's like, holy cow, I can't do this, or I can't think that, or I can't say that, because now I'm at a different level of accountability, because I'm up here on a podcast with all of these people looking at me. And if anything, if I don't witness to one person, it holds me more accountable. So I don't know. I got a different idea on how to answer the question, I guess. Probably doesn't make any sense.
No, I totally agree with you. I don't think we're called to be this or that, but I think we're called to whatever we are, to use our platforms to spread the word and to help others. And I can tell you that from my personal experience, I'm not going to say this is going to happen with everyone, but the more I've tried to use my platform for him, the more doors that have opened, and doors that I don't know that they would or would not have opened otherwise, but it becomes pretty apparent to me that the more I try to glorify him, the more doors are opened. But also at the same time, I think the bigger my platform gets, the more doors are open, the more I'm attacked. I don't think the
No
enemy
doubt about
likes
it.
it whatsoever.
Yeah,
So,
Satan obviously, God's using your interest and Satan's trying to prevent it. So I don't know. I guess if I was to think that God called people to do things like that, and maybe this is a really big stretch and I might need to study a little bit to back this up. But you look at when Jesus was here, if it was a matter of the ones that were called to do something, he would have gone to all the Pharisees and said and rounded up the best Pharisees to go start the church. The modern church was started in the New Testament, But instead he went and got, the apostles that all came. Some of them were tax collectors, some of them were fishermen. They were all just different people that, obviously they were called to follow Christ, but they hadn't given their lives to full-time Christian service. Jesus built the New Testament church with everyday people that had interest. I mean, I bet the disciples that were fishing were little kids that just loved to be on a boat and they love fishing, I could see them being a deer hunter or whatever. And so I think that to answer the question is, I don't know. I think that our responsibility as believers is to find ways and different opportunities in our everyday life to be a witness to help other people. And when you go about your life that way, God's going to glorify it. I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the podcast that my company found a hearing impaired gentleman that needed a job, and he had lost his wife and his daughter, and he was homeless. And I asked for prayers of it. Well, the guy's he's awesome. He's a welder, awesome employee. And when you really step back and think about it, it's like we probably saved this guy's life. And it really changed the perspective, even in the last couple of weeks, about how I do my job every day. Is when I go to my job, and my job isn't to run an organization, but my job is to make every employee and their family's life better somehow through their earning potential of their job. The company runs itself. Everybody does their job like they should be. I have reports and have to do different things and make decisions, but when you go about your life looking for ways to make a difference in somebody else's life, everything kind of figures itself out. And I think God's going to continue to glorify it, just like he's done in your life. I've known you long enough to see where you've struggled when your priority probably wasn't to glorify him. And I've seen you give everything to it. And I can tell you when the pivot point was and your businesses have blown up. It's when you turned everything over and used your platform, and we got a couple deadbeats out of our lives that were trying to hold us back and put the attention on themselves and not on Christ. When we changed the mentality of the business to not self-promotion and trying to position yourself versus put the glory to him, that's when our company took off.
I remember the day.
We should name that a holiday. We should do that.
Well,
we should celebrate that day.
It was absolutely life-changing. And I'll tell you what, well, I could get into a long-winded rant, but my eyes were open then on a lot of things. And, I was trying to push things one direction, and it just wasn't working, and had been pushing one direction for months. And when I gave in and went the other direction, I mean, it was like day and night. It was peace came over me.
But I think we always played and talked the talk that we were Christians and that we wanted to use our platforms. When we really decided to do it,
and we said we're gonna, and this was before the podcast. This was, years ago. But when we said this isn't about us anymore, and we separated away from the people that it was always about them, and that's when this thing absolutely blew up. I mean, we went over the sales numbers of Real World. I mean, look what we've done since then. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. God's glorified that decision, and thankfully so many loyal customers and followers, even to this podcast, have been there with us. So it's a testament that when you live the right way, good things are going to happen. They might not be what you think needs to happen. That's the other thing, is people think that everything gets handed to you. Sometimes there's a bigger picture play that we don't understand, but I think it's going to be glorified. So
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.
let's move on to the last question of the night. There was only 5. There wasn't 6. I'm the one that can't count. Once you get past one hand, I have trouble getting past 5.
I thought maybe you had 6 fingers on one hand or something, but so this one comes from Nate Meinhardt from Wheeler, Illinois. He says, "Dear Don and Terry, I love the podcast. I look forward to the new episode each week. I've heard you mention before and seen in some of your videos that most of your plots are long, narrow plots along the timber. What are the benefits to planting these longer, narrow plots over planting a more traditional big plot in a square or rectangular shape? Is this just something that's situational depending on the property? And for your situation, it works better for you to plant longer, narrower plots, whereas on a different property, it may be better to plant a large square or rectangular plot? Or have you found in all your years of hunting that a long, narrow plot provides some sort of positive advantage over other plots? I look forward to hearing your answer. Thanks again for a great podcast and always sharing the Lord. Keep the episodes coming." Nate, there is absolutely a method behind my madness when it comes to plot design. Those long, narrow plots, when a deer comes out into a plot or a field to feed or whatever, he's not going to just stand there. He's going to move around within that feeding area, whether it be a plot or a field. He's going to slowly move, and that's just nature's way of protecting him from predators. If he just stood there and never moved, he's at more danger, but he's always moving, always looking, kind of like cattle grazing in a pasture. They don't just stand in one spot and eat the grass to the ground. They're moving around. So knowing that a deer is, when he comes out to feed, is going to move, a long, narrow plot basically directs his movement. He's got one direction basically to go. He's going up and down that plot. Or if he comes out at one end, where's he going? He's not going to wander around. He's going to slowly work down that plot. I really like plots that I can set up on one edge and I can shoot clear to the other edge. I can shoot across that plot. I like them about 30 yards. A lot of my plots, I've got a 30-foot sprayer on my tractor, and most of my plots, all of my plots actually, I can spray in either 2 or 3 passes. So if I spray in 2 passes, it's 60 feet, which is 20 yards. If it's 3 passes, it's 30 yards. So I'm basing those basically on my equipment, but also on my preferred shot distance. Sometimes on the wider, 30-yard wide plots, I will even break those up so that I'll create an edge. We're big on edges too. If you got 2 different crops running the length of that long, narrow crop, that edge you create where those 2 plots meet, is going to be an absolute travel corridor. So, if you wanted a plot that's a little bit wider than what I'm talking about, say 50, 60 yards wide, you can still narrow that down by having two different crops, not planted on opposite ends, but planted the entire length and divide it that way, and you create a travel edge. But the method to the madness is that you're wanting that deer when he comes out, no matter where he comes out, which side of you, he's going to work his way down the length of that plot and pass within shooting range of your stand.
When you first started trying to talk me into doing a little bit of consulting, this was one of the things I was most insecure about. And just from an experience standpoint, is getting creative. And I think the more time that we've worked together and you've kind of taken me under your wing and trained me and talked about different ideas, and Wes the same way, I think you have to back up a little bit to answer the question. And if somebody else would look at your home farm and they would look at how the topography lays, my opinion is where one of your switchgrass fields is, where the smoky blind is right behind your house now, they make that all one big food plot because it's next to cover. And what you've done over time is you've put cover on basically the north and the south end of your farm, where there's a creek down the middle, and you're using the travel pattern of where that deer wants to go up and down that creek, meaning north and south, and created food along that with, basically think of it as an interstate with two exit ramps. And the bedding is at the two exit ramps. And in between those two exit ramps, I got an interstate going with a bluff that I can sneak in and hunt as they're going back and forth along that food. And being able to creatively look at a property and lay out and say, how can I manipulate habitat or create bedding in certain areas over time in one strategic area, and use food to bring them out along a strip and keep them moving to a point I can hunt them with access. That's really what you've done. That's the bigger story than just the narrow food plot. The narrow food plot is just a tool you're using to bring the deer past where you want to hunt, that you have access with a certain wind. So it's a long way, I think, Nate, to explain your question, but the benefit is the deer comes out, he goes through it during the rut. He's going to want to, the long, narrow ones that don't have line of sight are even the better ones, in my opinion, because he's going to travel that whole thing to see if there's does hot instead of just stand at the edge and look across it. But think about it a little bit differently, and maybe an interstate is a good or bad example, but think about, I need deer to get from point A to point B. How can I use terrain and food along that terrain to bring those deer past a point that I can hunt with a certain wind with good access? All of those are pieces that kind of go together to a property that's huntable. And I think that's the way you've implemented that narrow strip. And some properties you might not be able to do that. It might be laid out to where your property has awesome access all the way around it. You can come in from every direction. Some properties that we visit, we might say we want this food plot to pull deer out, and we're only going to hunt it with one direction because we only have one access point. So I think the strategy is not just your long, narrow food plot. It's also what's on each end of the food plot that I'm pulling deer out of that is creating the funnel or the push that we're hunting. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the shape of the food plot is just one piece of the puzzle. And you make a very good point, Terry, that, sometimes some properties you're limited. Maybe you need 10 acres of food, and the only place possible on the property is a big square field. Well, you need to put it all on food. Now, how you can break that up in certain ways and create edges like we talked about, but there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and food plots are just one of them.
One of the things that we've done a lot with our plans, the first one that I ever saw in person, I'd seen you do it on plans before, but one that was fully implemented. Let's say you do have a big field, a big chunk that you can't bust up, is putting a miscanthus tunnel out through the middle of it with a section of fence in the miscanthus. So what that's doing is that's taking a bigger square field that's kind of open and basically running 2 strips of miscanthus straight out with a blind out in the middle of the field where the wind's blowing back out this tunnel that we create, and then we put a section of fence along one edge so that the deer can't cross the tunnel. They have to go out and around that point. And basically what you're doing is you're creating a big U shape, and you can do crop rotations with those. But the first one I saw that you implemented that was mature was at our friend Ray and Aiden's at the remote master class. And, you know,
Right.
we've used that strategy a lot in customers' food or our clients' food plots when it's a big section of food plot with limited access that we need to bust up a little bit. It's a great option for people that don't have a long, narrow approach, but you can change that field to be to do the same thing.
Yeah, anybody that attended that remote master class in Ohio last winter knows exactly what we're talking about on that property where we went in and created that miscanthus tunnel. I'm not sure that some of the listeners who don't have are going to be able to come up with a visual in their head of exactly what we're trying to describe, but anybody that was at that class seen it firsthand.
Yep. So anyway, it's just a strategy we have. We have to get creative sometimes because every property isn't going to let us have a creek through the center and 30-yard food plot all the way up and down the creek. That's the layout of your property, and you've adapted to it. But you got to get creative no matter what the land gives you.
Right.
All right. Well, that was man, it's hard to believe 174 episodes already. We got a lot of new listeners. Our analytics are showing that we're picking up a lot of new people. The Whitetail Master Academy is obviously doing great. Real World's going great. We just can't we can't offer enough thanks for the people that are supporting us. And I guess what humbles me the most is when all of you all will also rally around other listeners like the family that just lost their wife and mother and rally around them. This is a special community that we're proud to be part of.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without the listeners. And, this is not a podcast that probably everybody's going to turn into every week. Some people probably are turned off pretty quick when they tune in. But we do appreciate each and every one of you that has supported us over 174 episodes, and 200 isn't that far away, Terry. So
it's
by the end of the year, we'll hit 200.
So what do you got going on? We're recording on Friday night. What do you got going on this weekend and next week?
This weekend, Father's Day. So I'm sure I'll go see my dad and my father-in-law, go to church. We got next week, I've got a local excavator coming in to demolish my old barn there at the farm and going to put a new building up down there. So that old barn was in sad shape.
How old is that barn? Do you have any idea?
It's got to be over 100 years old because the house there is, I think, 125, something like that.
Yeah. That's not pin and mortised, is it?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay.
It's pretty crudely built, and I'm going to try to save some of the beams in the loft so that my daughter can have them sawn down and planed down and she wants to make a kitchen table out of those. Cool. So other than that, it's going to be raked into a pile and demolished, and there'll be a building going up probably by the end of the month.
Yeah. There's an old pin and mortised barn on my place, and it's pretty cool. The craftsmanship back then was pretty neat. I don't know what we're going to do with it. It's in pretty bad shape, but we need to figure out something to do with it. I get on a flight at 6 a.m. in the morning to fly to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to watch 3 softball games my daughter's playing in, and then I turn around and fly back home.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, what a great way to spend Father's Day weekend.
Well, my wife changed jobs, so she's taking some time off and spending with the kids, and my daughter had a tournament in Myrtle Beach, so they went on down and they're spending some more time just chilling out, mother-daughter time. and I found a cheap flight, and I didn't want to miss it. And I have to be at work next week, so I wasn't able to stay. So I'm just going to fly down, watch 3 softball games, and turn around and fly home.
Good deal. I hope they win.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate your time. We'll see you next Sunday. It's gonna be July 4th before too long, Don. Velvet season's almost here.
I'm ready. God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.